Length in the metric system is measured with the base unit of the meter. The abbreviation for meter is lowercase m. Now, when we talk about these units, it's important that you have some quick reference objects for common length to use, not only for estimating the length of certain objects, but also being able to decide what unit of measurement is most appropriate given a specific object. So one of the quick reference objects that I used when I think about the meter is the height of a doorknob from the floor is about 1 meter high. All right, so that's the distance for a meter. In a comparison with the U.S. customary system, a meter is a little bit longer than a yard. Specifically, a meter is about 3 inches longer than a yard. So if you've seen a meter stick and a yard stick, they're about the same length. The meter stick is just a little bit longer. If you want to measure in a smaller unit, then the smaller unit that we go from after the meter, when we talked about our abbreviations, there is from your base unit, you could go down to a decimeter. 1 decimeter is 1/10 of a meter. The deci and the deca units aren't commonly used for measuring. So the most commonly next unit, if you're not going to use a meter, would be a centimeter. The centimeter abbreviation is cm. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. Or you could say that 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter. So you could also write that as a decimal as 0.01. As a reference object, the width of your small fingernail on your pinky is about 1 centimeter wide. An even smaller unit for measuring length would be the millimeter, whose abbreviation is mm. The millimeter is about the thickness of a sheet of metal or the depth of tire tread. So you can say that a millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter, where we could write that as in a decimal as 0.001, or you can say that you have 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. For a common reference object, the thickness of a dime is about 1 millimeter. So those would be very, very small units. If you want to measure very large distances or very large lengths, after your base unit of meters, again, we don't technically use the deca and the hecto as prefixes. It's not that you can't, they just aren't commonly used. So the next most commonly used prefix after the meter would be a kilometer, which abbreviation is km. 1 kilometer is 1,000 meters. And a kilometer is a little bit shorter than a mile, and it's approximately 3/5 of a mile. Okay, so if you think about if this distance right here is a mile, okay, and we break that mile up into 5 equal-sized pieces, okay, if you take 3 of those pieces, that's roughly about how long a 1 kilometer is. And then conversely, we could say that a mile is about 5/3 of a kilometer, or 1 2/3. So 1 mile is a little bit less than 2 kilometers. All right, so if you had another one of these 1/3 pieces, then we would be at exactly 2 kilometers. So 1 mile is a little bit less than 2 kilometers. So on our rulers, we've got our U.S. customaries units and inches on one side, and then typically there are metric measurements on the other side. So we want to make sure that we can read things in the metric system. So given this ruler snippet right here, we are going to find out how long it takes for me from 0, which would be my starting point, to measure out to A, B, C, and D. And we're going to give the results in millimeters, centimeters, and in meters. Now this is where the metric system really shines, is because the metric system is based upon powers of 10. So it's really easy to go back and forth between the different units. So for A, we are told on our ruler that the big numbers right here are going to be in centimeters. So all of the little tiny tick marks right here are going to be in millimeters. Okay, so this would here right here be 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters, and so on. But all of these little tick marks in between are for millimeters. So for where A is right here, we could say that is, so I'm going to be at 1. Actually, I should probably move that highlighting. This is the long line for 1 right here. So I'm past 1, and then I'm 2 more tick marks over. So A could be at 1.2 centimeters, if I want to measure that out in centimeters. But if you read all the little tiny ticks to get to A, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So at 10 ticks, I'm at 1 centimeter, right? So 10 millimeters is equivalent to 1 centimeter. And then 2 more tick marks over. So this is also the same as 12 millimeters over. And then in terms of meters, remember that a millimeter is a thousandth of a meter. So if I'm at 12 millimeters, this is equivalent to 12 thousandths of a meter, which in its decimal form would be 0.012. So you can see going back and forth between these different measurements, we're basically just moving the decimal point. So for B, the mark at B is right at the long line for 2, so that would be at 2 centimeters. If I wanted to read that in terms of millimeters, because every centimeter has 10 millimeters, that would be at 20 millimeters. And then since a millimeter is a thousandth of a meter, this would be at 20 thousandth meters, or 0.020 meters. And if you wanted to, you could leave off that trailing 0 right there, but I'm going to leave it there so we can connect it back to what I wrote for my millimeters. For C, C is pointed right here at kind of this long line halfway between 2 and 3, so that's the mark for 5. So this would be at 2.5 centimeters, which is equivalent to 25 millimeters. And then 25 millimeters would be 25 thousandths of a meter, so 0.025 meters. And then finally D all the way over here. So it would be, if this is line for 12, so then I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tick marks over before I get to the marking for D. So that would be at 12.8 centimeters, which would be 128 millimeters, which is equivalent to 128 thousandths of a meter. So I want this 8 to end in my thousandths spot, which is my third spot over. So this would be 0.128. So remember, that's your tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So this number will end in the thousandth spot, and then my abbreviation then is M for meters.